Welcome, curious travelers, to a journey not through sights or stories, but through the very air itself, the unseen, unheard world of ancient sounds. For millennia, our ancestors lived amidst a vibrant symphony of existence, a tapestry of auditory experiences that shaped their daily lives, their beliefs, and their very perception of reality. From the whispers of desert winds to the roar of chariot races, these echoes of the past hold secrets to understanding who they were. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Let's take a journey together back to the dawn of our planet and listen to the Earth's first and purest symphony. Before human ingenuity began to reshape the world, nature was the one and only composer, and its orchestra was the planet itself. The soundscape was raw, powerful, and utterly dominant. Imagine standing on a vast, empty landscape of prehistory. There's no music in your ears, no distant sirens, no planes overhead. What do you hear? You hear the wind. Not just a gentle breeze, but a relentless force, sculpting canyons over millennia, a low, persistent hum that is the very breath of the planet. You hear the distant, ominous rumble of thunder rolling across an open savanna, a sound that promises life-giving rain, but also primal danger. And you hear the rhythmic, hypnotic crash of waves against a coastline that has seen eons pass, a constant, powerful heartbeat of the ocean. This was the world our earliest ancestors were born into. They didn't just hear these sounds. They lived within them. They were in intimate communion with this natural symphony. Think about the sounds of an ancient forest, a place teeming with life that we can now only imagine. The rustle of leaves under the weight of some immense, long-extinct creature. The calls of birds whose songs are forever lost to time. The subtle snap of a twig that could signal either a meal or a mortal threat. This wasn't background noise. It was the most critical information stream available. These sounds were vital cues for survival. The change in the wind's tone could foretell a coming storm. The sudden silence of the cicadas could mean a predator was near. The babble of a hidden stream meant the difference between life and death. The world spoke, and to survive you had to listen. Let's close our eyes for a moment and imagine a prehistoric night. With no artificial light to pierce the darkness, the world transforms. The sense of sight, so dominant during the day, gives way to hearing. The night belongs to sound. The comforting, rhythmic chirp of crickets might be a baseline of safety, a sign that all is well. But then a sound cuts through it, the chilling, lonely howl of a wolf pack, echoing across the valleys. That sound isn't just an animal call. It's a declaration of territory, a warning, a reminder of your own vulnerability in a world not yet tamed. The hoot of an owl, the splash in a distant river, every sound was magnified, every note carrying immense weight and meaning. In this nocturnal world, your ears were often far more important than your eyes. These powerful, all-encompassing sounds didn't just dictate survival tactics. They shaped the very core of early human consciousness and spirituality. When the only voices you hear are the thunder, the wind, and the roaring rivers, it's only natural to believe they are the voices of the gods. The rumble of an earthquake wasn't just geology. It was the stirring of a powerful earth spirit. The whisper of the wind through the tall grasses could be messages from ancestors. The sound of a waterfall wasn't just falling water. It was a sacred place, a source of power and cleansing. Natural phenomena were imbued with intention, with personality, with a divine voice. The soundscape was the cathedral, and the sounds of nature were the hymns. This deep, spiritual connection to the acoustic environment is something we've largely lost, insulated as we are by our modern walls and technologies. But it wasn't all about fear and survival. Imagine the sheer beauty of it all. The sound of the first spring rain tapping on broad leaves after a long dry season. The chorus of frogs celebrating in a newly formed pond. The gentle lapping of a lake against the shore on a calm, quiet morning. These were sounds of reassurance, of continuity, of the cyclical nature of life. They were the lullabies of the ancient world. The very rhythm of life was dictated by these natural tempos, the cycle of day and night, the turning of the seasons, all marked by a changing soundscape. It was a world of profound quiet and profound noise, a dynamic range that our modern ears are no longer accustomed to. So as we stand on the precipice of our journey through the history of sound, we begin here in this primordial hum. A world shaped by the elements where every sound was a story, a warning, or a prayer. This was the baseline, the original soundtrack of our planet. It's a world we can never truly return to, but by trying to imagine its sounds, we can begin to understand not only the world we came from, but also how much our own world has changed. What we choose to listen to, and what we choose to tune out, defines our reality. And for our earliest ancestors, listening wasn't a choice, it was life itself. Today, we leave the whispers of the wilderness behind and step into the heart of the first great urban experiment, the cities of Mesopotamia. Close your eyes for a moment and let's travel back 4, maybe 5,000 years. We're standing at the gates of Uruk, or perhaps the legendary Babylon. What do you hear? It's not silence. It's an explosion of human life, the first great symphony of civilization. This is where humanity learned to live together, shoulder to shoulder, in vast unprecedented numbers. And the sound it created was unlike anything the world had ever heard before. Let's walk into the marketplace, the vibrant, chaotic heart of the city. The air is thick with 1,000 different noises, all competing for your attention. Listen. Over here, a merchant is shouting, his voice rising above the din, advertising the quality of his dates, fresh from the groves along the Euphrates, the sweetest in all of Sumer. He cries. A few stalls down, a woman is haggling fiercely over the price of a bolt of brightly dyed wool, her gestures as animated as her words. You hear the sharp clatter of pottery as a potential buyer inspects a jug, tapping it to check for cracks. And underneath it all, a constant bleating and lowing from the livestock section, where sheep and goats are being sold. Their sounds a rural reminder in this urban jungle. This isn't just noise. It's the sound of commerce, of survival, of a society building its foundations on trade and interaction. Moving away from the market's core, the sounds of the city begin to change. The human voices are replaced by the rhythmic pulse of industry. Hear that steady, metallic clang? That's a bronze smith's hammer striking an anvil, forging tools, weapons, or ornate jewelry. The rhythm is relentless, a testament to the skill and strength required for this vital craft. And listen closely. A different kind of percussion. It's the crisp, chipping sound of a stonemason's chisel against a block of limestone, slowly shaping it for a new temple wall or a grand palace facade. Every strike is a mark of progress, literally carving civilization out of raw materials. The creak and groan of wooden cartwheels on dusty, unpaved streets provides a constant, low-frequency backdrop, the sound of goods being moved from the river docks to the granaries, from the workshops to the homes of the wealthy. Now let's turn our attention towards the grand ziggurat that dominates the skyline. As we get closer, a new sound emerges from the temple complex. It's a low, resonant drone, the sound of priests chanting their hymns to Marduk or Inanna. This isn't the boisterous noise of the market. It's a sacred, structured sound designed to inspire awe and connect the earthly city to the divine realm. It's the spiritual heartbeat of Mesopotamia. But not all sounds are of choice or reverence. From a nearby construction site, you might hear the sharp, sudden crack of a whip, followed by a shouted command, a stark reminder of the rigid social hierarchies and the forced labor that built these monumental structures. It's a harsh, uncomfortable sound, but a crucial part of this complex urban tapestry, a testament to the power wielded by kings and priests. Finally, let's step inside the walls of a palace or an administrative building. Here the clamor of the city fades, replaced by a more subtle, yet equally important, set of sounds. The air is filled with a soft, scratching rhythm. It's the sound of dozens of scribes, each with a reed stylus pressing wedge-shaped marks into wet clay tablets. This is the sound of bureaucracy, of history being recorded, of laws being codified. Each scratch is a transaction logged, a royal decree documented, a story preserved for millennia. The quiet rustle of official garments, the murmur of couriers delivering messages, the distant clinking of cups from the royal quarters. These are the sounds of power and administration. This was a world alive, not just with the noise of the crowd, but with the quiet, persistent hum of a complex, organized society. The sounds of Mesopotamia were the sounds of humanity inventing the future. One clay tablet, one hammered bronze pot, and one shouted bargain at a time. This intricate soundscape reveals a civilization that was dynamic, innovative, and deeply complex. It was a world of stark contrasts. The sacred chants and the slave driver's whip, the boisterous market and the quiet scribe's chamber. By listening to these echoes, we don't just learn about the past, we experience it. We understand that these weren't just names in a history book, but living, breathing cities filled with people whose lives were as loud, messy, and vibrant as our own. The Symphony of Mesopotamia set the stage for every city that followed, a powerful overture to the grand story of human civilization. The river was the highway, the farm, the very heart of Egypt, and its sounds were the constant, soothing backdrop to life and death. But listen closer, beyond the river's whisper. From the distance you can hear a different rhythm, a powerful, unified chant. It's the sound of thousands of laborers, their muscles straining as they haul impossibly massive stones, inch by agonizing inch, to build the temples of their gods and the eternal homes for their pharaohs. It's the sound of ambition, of devotion, of a civilization shaping its own landscape in stone. The sounds of civilization, however, were always bordered by the wild. From the vast, sun-scorched desert that stretched beyond the fertile black land, you might hear the chilling roar of a lion, a stark reminder of the untamed forces of nature. Perhaps the distant, trumpeting call of an elephant, a creature of legend and power. These were the sounds from the edge of their world, the sounds that fueled myths and inspired awe for the gods who tamed the chaos. Let's return to the green river valley, where the majority of life unfolded. Here, in the fields bursting with life, the soundscape is gentler. Imagine walking through a grove of papyrus reeds, the tall stalks rustling and whispering in the gentle breeze. Listen to the symphony of water birds, the cry of the ibis, the honk of geese as they search for food in the marshes. And underpinning it all is another rhythmic sound, the swish and gurgle of water being lifted by a shaduf, as a farmer tirelessly irrigates his crops, turning the desert's edge into a paradise of green. It's a sound of sustenance, of an ancient and ingenious partnership between humanity and the river. Now, let's step out of the sun and into the cool, colossal shadows of a grand temple, the house of a god. The air itself feels different here, heavy with reverence and incense. The sound changes completely. It becomes a deep, sonorous drone, the chanting of priests reciting sacred texts, their voices echoing off walls covered in hieroglyphs. This drone is punctuated by the sharp, metallic ringing of the sistrum, a sacred rattle shaken by priestesses to honor goddesses like Hathor and Isis. The air is also filled with the reedy, ethereal notes of a flute, its melody weaving through the stone columns like a prayer taking flight. This was the sound of eternity, of communion with the divine. Finally, we find ourselves back in the chaotic, vibrant heart of a town market. Like the markets of Mesopotamia, it's a cacophony of human activity. The haggling of merchants, the chatter of shoppers, the bleating of goats. But listen for the details, the distinctly Egyptian inflections. Perhaps you'd hear the cheerful chirping of a specific type of bird kept as a beloved pet, or the unique twang and beat of Egyptian musical instruments being played by a street performer. It's in these subtle, unique sounds that the true character of a place is revealed. From the grandest temple to the humblest market stall, every sound tells a story of this incredible civilization, a symphony of life played out along the banks of the Nile. Imagine leaving the sandy shores of Egypt and crossing the vast, sparkling Mediterranean. The air changes, becoming briny and fresh. The destination? The heart of the Aegean Sea, home to two of Europe's earliest and most enigmatic civilizations, the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. Welcome to a world of island palaces and warrior kings, a soundscape painted with both artistry and ambition. Let's listen to the Aegean whispers. Our first stop is the island of Crete, the domain of the Minoans. Forget what you think you know about ancient cities. This isn't a world of grim stone and survival. Minoan civilization was vibrant, colorful, and alive. Let's step into the legendary palace of Knossos. It's not a fortress, but a sprawling labyrinthine complex, open to the sun and sea breeze. Close your eyes and listen. What do you hear? The primary sound is one of bustling, peaceful activity. Hear the light, quick footsteps of servants and artisans echoing down frescoed corridors. Their sandals slap gently against polished plaster floors. From a nearby workshop, you can hear the delicate clinking of pottery, as a craftsperson paints an octopus with swirling tentacles onto a clay vase. There's the soft whir of a potter's wheel, a rhythmic and constant hum of creation. From a central courtyard, a gentle melody drifts on the air. It's the sound of a lyre, its strings plucked to create a soothing, almost hypnotic tune, perhaps accompanied by the airy notes of a flute. This music isn't for a battlefield. It's for leisure, for ceremony, for royalty, enjoying an afternoon in a sun-drenched hall. The Minoan world was one of sophisticated pleasures, and their soundscape reflects that. It's the sound of a civilization at ease with itself, confident in its place in the world. But Minoan life wasn't all peaceful music and pottery. They had a ritual that was anything but tranquil, the famous bull leaping. Let's transport ourselves to the central court during one of these events. The atmosphere is electric. The murmur of the crowd swells into a roar of anticipation. They aren't in tiered stone seats, but lining the balconies and rooftops of the palace, a part of the action. Then the main event. A massive bull, a symbol of power and fertility, is released. Listen to its deep, guttural snorts, the heavy thud of its hooves pawing at the earth. The air fills with the sharp, excited shouts of the crowd. Then silence for a split second as an athlete, male or female, makes their run. You hear the pounding of their feet, a quick gasp of air, and then the percussive asterisk, thump asterisk, as their hands connect with the bull's powerful back. The crowd erupts. It's a cacophony of cheers, gasps, and applause. The sound isn't one of brutal combat, but of daring acrobatic ritual. The thud of the leaper's feet landing safely on the ground is met with another wave of celebration. It's a sound that mixes danger, skill, and religious fervor, a unique auditory signature of Minoan culture. Now let's sail north, from the open palaces of Crete to the Greek mainland, to the imposing citadels of the Mycenaeans. The difference in sound is immediate and striking. As you approach the citadel fattories of Mycenae, the first thing you notice is the sound of stone on stone. These were not the open-air complexes of the Minoans. These were fortresses, built for war and defense. The dominant sound here is martial. Listen, it's the rhythmic clang of bronze on bronze, as soldiers train in the yard, their shields and spears clashing in mock combat. You hear the sharp commands of a captain, a voice hardened by battle, echoing off the massive Cyclopean walls. The air is punctuated by the neighing of horses, a sound of cavalry and chariots, the engines of Bronze Age warfare. Walk through the Lion Gate, the stone groaning under its own immense weight. Inside, the sounds are heavier, more serious. The footsteps are not the light patter of servants, but the heavy tread of armored guards. From a smithy you don't hear the delicate clinking of pottery, but the loud, forceful asterisk, bang asterisk of a hammer shaping a bronze sword, sparks flying with each strike. It's a sound of constant readiness, a civilization living under the shadow of conflict. Even their palaces sounded different. While a Minoan king might listen to a lyre, a Mycenaean wainax or king might be listening to the reports of his generals, the rustle of maps, and the low, serious tones of a council of war. The soundscape is one of power, hierarchy, and a constant, vigilant watchfulness. It is the audio of a society that would launch 1,000 ships to sack the city of Troy. And what about those ships? The sea was the highway of the Aegean, connecting these two great cultures. For both the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, the sounds of seafaring were a part of daily life. Let's stand on a dock in a bustling harbor. The air is thick with the calls of sailors, shouting to each other in a language we can no longer understand, but their meaning is clear. Hoisting sails, casting ropes, navigating the busy waters. Listen to the ship itself. It's a living, breathing thing. The constant creak and groan of the wooden hull as it strains against the water. The rhythmic slap of waves against the bow, a sound that could be either gentle and soothing on a calm day, or a violent, threatening crash during a storm. Above you, the snap of the sail as it catches the wind, and the hum of the ropes in the rigging vibrating like a giant string instrument. These sounds, the peaceful hum of a Minoan palace, the dangerous roar of the bull-leaping ceremony, the clang of Mycenaean armor, and the creak of a ship on the open Aegean, are more than just background noise. They are the echoes of lost worlds. They tell us a story of two civilizations, related yet distinct. One, a culture of art, trade, and ritual. The other, a society of warriors, kings, and epic sagas. By listening closely, we can almost feel the sun on our faces in Knossos or the chill of the stone walls in Mycenae. We're not just learning about history. We are experiencing it, one sound at a time. The whispers of the Aegean are faint, but they are still there, waiting for us to listen. Imagine the powerful voice of an orator like Pericles, his words echoing across the crowd, persuading, arguing, shaping the future of the city. And then the critical sound of decision-making. It's not a gavel, but the subtle clink of bronze pebbles, or ostracons, being cast into an urn, each one a vote, each one a voice in the world's first democracy. This was the sound of a city thinking, arguing, and deciding its own destiny out in the open for all to hear. From the political stage, we move to a place of ecstatic celebration, the Dionysian festivals. This wasn't a quiet affair. It was an explosion of sound and emotion dedicated to the god of wine and revelry. Picture thousands gathered in a vast open-air theater, the likes of which you can still see at Epidaurus. The festival would begin with wild processions, the air filled with the sounds of revelry and joyous shouts. Then the music. Forget a subtle background score. This was front and center. The sharp, reedy call of the aloes, a double-pipe instrument, pierced the air, driving the energy of the crowd. Its sound was often described as exciting, even intoxicating. In contrast, you'd hear the gentle, soothing strums of the lyre, its strings plucked to accompany epic poems and lyrical songs. This instrument was associated with Apollo, representing order and harmony. The interplay between the wild aloes and the structured lyre was the sound of the Greek soul itself, a balance of passion and reason. And at the heart of the Dionysian festival was the birth of drama. Imagine a chorus of 50 men, their voices chanting in perfect unison, a powerful rhythmic wave of sound washing over the audience. Their feet would stamp the orchestra floor, creating a percussive beat that you could feel in your chest. Then, from this chorus, a single actor would step forward. Thespis, the legendary first actor, would have initiated this, creating dialogue where there was once only a story. Can you imagine the hush falling over the crowd as they heard, for the first time, a character speaking on stage? The dramatic recitations of Sophocles or Euripides, the actors' voices trained to carry to the very last row of the stone amphitheater, without any amplification. The sound of tragedy and comedy, of human hubris and divine fate, echoing under the Attic sky. This was more than entertainment. It was a civic duty, a shared emotional and spiritual experience for the entire polis. Now let's travel to the dusty plains of Olympia, where a different kind of sound dominated every 4 years, the ancient Olympic Games. This was an international event, and the soundscape was a roar of human endeavor. Forget the polite applause of modern stadiums. This was a raw, unfiltered explosion of sound from tens of thousands of spectators, their shouts of encouragement and gasps of awe echoing across the valley. The games began with solemn rituals, the sounds of hymns and prayers to Zeus. Then the competition. Hear the rhythmic, pounding beat of runners' feet on the packed earth of the stadium track, a sound of pure athleticism and endurance. Listen for the sharp, percussive thud of wrestlers' bodies hitting the sand, their grunts of effort a testament to their strength. You'd hear the whistle and whir of a discus flying through the air, followed by the solid thunk as it landed, and the clang of bronze javelins, not as weapons, but as tools of sport, arcing through the sky. Victory was announced not by a digital scoreboard, but by the roar of the crowd and the herald's booming voice, proclaiming the winner's name and city, a sound of immense pride and glory that would echo for generations. But not all of ancient Greece was loud and chaotic. Let's retreat to the shaded groves of the Academy, just outside Athens. Here, a very different soundscape prevailed. This was the world of Plato and his students. The dominant sound was quiet, focused discussion. Instead of passionate oratory meant to sway a crowd, you'd hear the calm, measured tones of philosophical inquiry. The Socratic method in action, a gentle back and forth of questions and answers, a dialectic dance of logic. The soundscape would be punctuated by the rustle of papyrus scrolls being unrolled, the soft scratch of a stylus on a wax tablet, and the gentle murmur of students debating concepts of justice, beauty, and truth. This was the sound of deep thinking, of minds at work, a stark contrast to the agora's noise. Music was also present here, but for a different purpose. It wasn't for revelry, but for education. The Greeks believed music could shape character, that certain modes and rhythms could instill virtue and order in the soul. So you might hear the gentle mathematical harmonies of the lyre used not to excite, but to focus the mind and elevate the spirit. The ancient Greeks understood something profound. That sound shapes us. They theorized about the music of the spheres, the idea that the planets and stars moved in a silent, perfect harmony, a cosmic symphony. This belief reflected their worldview, that order, mathematics, and beauty were all interconnected. For them, music wasn't just a series of notes. It was a microcosm of the universe itself. The specific sounds of their instruments were chosen for their perceived effect on human emotion and character. The lyre, with its connection to Apollo and logic, was considered essential for a young citizen's education. The aloes, linked to Dionysus and emotion, was for celebration, but also viewed with some caution. They believed the right sounds could create a good citizen, and the wrong sounds could lead to chaos. From the roar of the Olympics to the hushed debates of the Academy, the sounds of ancient Greece were never accidental. They were the deliberate, carefully crafted soundtrack to a civilization that placed ideas, art, and community at its very core. And so, as we leave the ancient Hellenic world, we carry with us the echoes of a civilization that truly listened. They listened to their leaders in the agora, their gods in the temples, their poets in the theaters, and their teachers in the academies. They understood that sound was a powerful tool for building a society, shaping a mind, and touching the human soul. The sounds of debate, music, drama, and sport were the threads that wove the fabric of their world together. Our first stop is the nerve center of the city, the Roman Forum. This wasn't just a collection of beautiful buildings. It was a cacophony of human activity. Imagine standing amidst the towering columns and basilicas. All around you the air buzzes. You'd hear the passionate, booming voices of senators debating the fate of provinces, their speeches echoing off the marble. Nearby, lawyers argue their cases with dramatic flair, their voices rising and falling as they plead before a crowd. But it's not just politics. The forum was also a marketplace. The sharp, rhythmic calls of vendors hawking everything from exotic spices and silks to everyday pottery and bread would cut through the air. You'd hear the clinking of coins, the haggling over prices, and the constant, shuffling murmur of thousands of citizens, patricians in their fine togas, soldiers on leave, merchants and slaves, all going about their business. It's the sound of a city that never sleeps, a constant thrum of commerce and conversation. Now let's move from the heart of politics to the heart of entertainment, the Circus Maximus. The sheer scale of this venue is hard to comprehend, capable of holding over 150,000 spectators. The sound here wasn't just loud, it was deafening. Picture the start of a chariot race. A trumpet blast cuts through the anticipation. Then an earth-shaking thunder as dozens of hooves pound against the sandy track. The roar of the crowd is a physical force, a wave of sound that crashes over you. You'd hear the creak and groan of wooden wheels straining under pressure, the sharp crack of the charioteer's whip, and the desperate shouts of drivers urging their horses onward. It's the sound of pure, adrenaline-fueled spectacle. But of course we cannot speak of Roman entertainment without visiting the most infamous arena of all, the Colosseum. The sounds here were of a different, more visceral nature. The collective gasp of 50,000 people as the gladiators entered the arena. The tense silence before a fight, broken only by the scrape of sandals on sand. Then the brutal clang of sword against shield, the grunts of effort, and the roar of the crowd, a mix of cheers and jeers reacting to every blow. You might also hear the guttural roars of lions and tigers released from cages below the arena floor, adding a terrifying primal layer to the soundscape. It's a chilling symphony of life and death, entertainment at its most extreme. Yet Rome's sound was not all chaos and conflict. The genius of Roman engineering introduced a whole new set of auditory experiences. Stand anywhere in the city, and you'd likely be within earshot of one of the great aqueducts. The sound of water, a constant, gushing, life-giving flow, was the background music of the city. It was the sound of civilization itself, a testament to Rome's ability to tame nature. This water fed the city's many fountains, and of course the famous Roman baths. Let's step inside one of these bathhouses, the social hubs of Roman life. The dominant sound here is water, the gentle splashing in the cooler pools, the more vigorous sloshing in the hot caldarium asterisk. But listen closer. You'll hear the echo of conversations bouncing off the high, vaulted ceilings. Romans didn't just bathe here. They did business, gossiped, and relaxed. You might hear the slap and need of a massage, or even the strained grunts of men exercising in the attached gymnasium. It's a soundscape of community, cleanliness, and leisure. And underpinning all of this was the sound of construction. The Roman Empire was in a perpetual state of being built. The sharp asterisk, chink, chink, chink asterisk, of a stonemason's chisel shaping a block of marble, the rhythmic thud of hammers driving posts, the shouts of foremen directing workers. This was the sound of an empire expanding, not just its borders, but its very infrastructure. It's the sound of ambition made manifest in stone and mortar. Finally, no sound defined Rome's power more than the rhythmic, disciplined tramp of its legions. The sound of thousands of *, the hobnailed military sandals marching in perfect unison on a paved Roman road is a sound of pure order and power. It's the metronome of the empire, a beat that echoed from the misty forests of Britannia to the deserts of Syria. It was a sound that announced the arrival of Roman law, Roman engineering, and Roman authority. It was the sound of an empire on the march. From the roar of the Colosseum to the murmur of the Forum, from the thunder of the circus to the gushing of the aqueducts, the Roman Empire was a world of powerful, diverse, and unforgettable sounds. It was the noise of a civilization at the peak of its power, a sonic testament to its enduring legacy. Beyond the great walls of Rome and the opulent courts of Han China, a different kind of empire thrived. Not one of soldiers and kings, but of merchants and monks, dreamers and adventurers. This was the Silk Road, a sprawling network of arteries that pumped life, goods, and ideas across the ancient world. But it wasn't just silk and spices that traveled these dusty paths. It was sound, a symphony of human connection played out over thousands of miles. Let's close our eyes for a moment and listen to the sounds of these ancient trade routes. The first sound you'd hear, the constant rhythm of the journey, is the creak and groan of 1,000 camel caravans. Imagine the slow, swaying gait of these ships of the desert, their hooves padding softly on the sand. Each step is accompanied by the rhythmic jingle of bells tied to their harnesses, a simple, practical tool to keep the caravan together, but also a hypnotic, melodic percussion that marked the endless miles from Chang'an to Antioch. This sound, more than any other, was the heartbeat of the Silk Road. It was the sound of persistence, of endurance, of the slow, steady movement of humanity across the vast, silent deserts and over treacherous mountain passes. It was a sound that meant trade, travel, and the promise of a distant destination. But the caravans were not silent. Listen closer, and you'll hear the murmur of human voices, a tapestry of languages weaving together in the dry desert air. A Sogdian merchant haggles with a Persian trader in a mix of their native tongues and a common trade language. A Buddhist monk from India softly chants a sutra, his voice a low, peaceful drone against the wind. A Roman envoy far from home might be trying to learn a few words of Chinese from his guide. This mingling of tongues wasn't just noise. It was the sound of cultures meeting, of ideas being exchanged, of worlds colliding and learning from one another. In these quiet conversations, held around a crackling campfire under a blanket of stars, knowledge of medicine, astronomy, religion, and art was passed from one mind to another. It was a university on the move, its lectures delivered in a dozen different accents. Now, imagine arriving at one of the great oasis cities, a jewel like Samarkand, Bukhara, or Dunhuang. The relative quiet of the desert gives way to an explosion of sound. These weren't just rest stops. They were vibrant, multicultural hubs, the bustling hearts of the Silk Road. The air thrums with energy. The first thing to hit your ears is the cacophony of the marketplace. The loud, melodic calls of vendors hawking their wares. Fine silk from the East, spices from the Indies, glassware from Rome. Each call is unique, a signature sound designed to cut through the din and lure you to their stall. The scent of cardamom and cinnamon hangs in the air, inseparable from the sounds of commerce. As you navigate the crowded alleys, you hear the sounds of craftsmanship. Listen to the rhythmic clang, clang, clang of a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil, mending a broken wheel or forging new tools for the next leg of the journey. This was the sound of repair, of practicality, the essential work that kept the caravans moving. Nearby you might hear the gentle, rhythmic thud and clatter of a loom. A weaver, her hands a blur of motion, transforms threads of brilliant silk into intricate patterns. The sound is hypnotic, a testament to the patience and skill that created the very commodity that gave this road its name. Each craft had its own sonic signature, a symphony of creation that filled the city's workshops. Music was everywhere. The Silk Road didn't just carry goods, it carried melodies. From a tavern, you might hear the stirring, fast-paced strings of a Persian tar, its music telling tales of ancient heroes and lost loves. A group of musicians from the Kushan Empire might be playing long-necked lutes and hand drums, their rhythms infectious, drawing a crowd of clapping, dancing onlookers. A Chinese musician might be playing a guzheng, its delicate, flowing notes painting a picture of misty mountains and serene rivers. These instruments and the musical styles they represented traveled with the merchants. An instrument that started in Persia could end up in China, where it would be adapted, changed, and incorporated into a new musical tradition. This was a grand, unplanned collaboration, a jam session that spanned a continent and lasted for centuries. And woven through all of this was the sound of faith. The Silk Road was a conduit for spirituality, and you could hear it in the air. The sonorous call to prayer from a minaret would echo across the city rooftops 5 times a day. From a Nestorian Christian church you might hear the faint sound of hymns being sung in Syriac. In another quarter, the deep, resonant chanting of Buddhist monks reciting scriptures would emanate from a monastery, the sound of gongs marking the passage of time. Zoroastrians, Manichaeans, Jews, all had their own sacred sounds, their prayers and songs adding another layer to the city's rich auditory tapestry. These sounds weren't in conflict. They coexisted, a testament to the relative tolerance and cultural curiosity that characterized these cosmopolitan centers. The soundscape was a living symbol of the road's power to connect not just markets, but souls. So the Silk Road was far more than a line on a map. It was a living, breathing entity, and its breath was sound. It was the jingle of a camel's bell in the vast, empty desert. It was the murmur of a dozen languages around a campfire. It was the vibrant chaos of the Samarkand bazaar, the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the hypnotic rhythm of the weaver's loom. It was the music of lutes and the chanting of prayers. It was the sound of East meeting West, of ideas sparking, of humanity reaching out across immense distances to connect, to trade, and to share. It was a symphony of movement, commerce, and culture, a soundtrack for one of the greatest chapters in human history. The canopy above us is filled with the chattering of spider monkeys and the shrill, exotic calls of macaws and toucans. This is the constant, natural soundtrack of Mayan life. From the city's residential areas, another sound emerges, a steady, rhythmic pounding. That's the sound of daily life, of women grinding maize on stone metates to prepare tortillas and tamales. It's a percussive beat that signifies sustenance, family, and community, the very heartbeat of the city. Now, listen closer. A deeper, more powerful rhythm begins to build. It emanates from the city's ceremonial center, from the top of those towering stone pyramids that pierce the jungle canopy. It's the sound of ritual, the deep thrum of wooden slit drums, the rattling of gourds, the piercing whistles of clay ocarinas, and the resonant chanting of priests, their voices echoing off the stone facades. These weren't just noises. They were a direct line of communication with the gods, a way to structure time and sanctify space. Imagine standing at the base of the temple of the great jaguar. The air is thick with the scent of copal incense, and the soundscape is designed to inspire awe, reverence, and perhaps a touch of fear. The acoustics were intentional. The plazas were designed to carry sound, allowing the ruler's voice and the sacred music to reach the thousands gathered below. And then there's the ball game, the pits. This was no ordinary sport. It was a cosmic drama played out in a stone court. Picture the scene. The intense silence of the crowd, broken by the sharp, heavy thud of the solid rubber ball, hitting the player's hips, thighs, and sometimes the stone walls of the court. Then the eruption of shouts from the spectators, the cries of victory and defeat. The sounds of the ball game were the sounds of life, death, and cosmic struggle, all condensed into one powerful, visceral experience. Now let's travel south, leaving the humid lowlands of Mesoamerica and climbing high into the crisp, thin air of the Andes Mountains, the domain of the Inca Empire. The soundscape here is entirely different, shaped by the vast vertical landscape. The dominant sound is often the wind itself, whistling through mountain passes and across the high plateaus, a constant, haunting presence. And riding on that wind you might hear the ethereal, breathy melody of a pond pipe, a saiku, or antera. These melodies, played by a lone herder or a group of musicians, seem to echo the vastness of the mountains themselves. They are sounds of solitude, of distance, and of a deep connection to the Pachamama, the Mother Earth. The flutes, or quenas, would add their own plaintive, soulful voice to this Andean symphony. Listen to the sounds of the Inca economy, the soft bleating of llamas and alpacas, the empire's most vital animals, their gentle footsteps echoing on the stone-paved paths. In the villages, you'd hear the click-clack of looms, the rhythmic sound of weavers transforming vibrant wool into intricate textiles that told stories and recorded information. This was the sound of productivity, of an empire built on careful organization and collective labor. The Inca Empire was renowned for its incredible road system, the Capac On, which spanned thousands of miles. A key sound along this network would be the footfalls and rhythmic calls of the chasquis, the royal messengers. Imagine hearing the distant sound of a conch-shell trumpet, a putatu, signaling the arrival or departure of an important official, or the relay of a crucial message. These sounds were the sonic glue holding a vast, sprawling empire together, connecting a diverse population across immense geographical barriers. From the ceremonial drums of a Mayan temple to the lonely pan pipe echoing through an Andean valley, the sounds of the ancient Americas were profoundly shaped by their unique environments and spiritual beliefs. The jungle provided a rich, cacophonous backdrop in Mesoamerica, while the mountains of the Andes inspired sounds of vastness and solitude. In both regions, sound was not just a byproduct of life. It was a tool for communicating with the divine, organizing society, and expressing a deep relationship with the natural world. It was the voice of civilizations that rose and fell long before the first European ships appeared on the horizon. leaving behind echoes that we are still trying to decipher today. Have you ever wondered what the sacred sounded like in the ancient world? What echoes filled the temples and ceremonial grounds thousands of years ago? Today we journey back in time to listen to the mystical murmurs of ancient religions, a soundscape designed to bridge the gap between humanity and the divine. From the majestic temples of Egypt to the vibrant rituals of the Mayans, sound was a powerful tool, shaping belief and experience. It wasn't just background noise. It was an active participant in connecting with the gods. So close your eyes and let your imagination fill with the sounds we're about to explore. This is the auditory world of ancient faith. Let's begin our journey in ancient Egypt, along the fertile banks of the Nile. Imagine standing within the colossal stone walls of the Karnak temple. The air is thick with the scent of incense. Here, the dominant sound is the human voice, but not just any voice. It's the deep, resonant chanting of the priests, a low, guttural vibration that seems to emanate from the very stone itself. These weren't just prayers. They were incantations, words of power spoken in a precise, rhythmic cadence. The ancient Egyptians believed that the correct pronunciation of these sacred words could influence the gods and the cosmos. The sound was designed to be awe-inspiring, to create a sense of immensity and timelessness, making a mortal feel small in the presence of the eternal gods. Accompanying these chants was a unique instrument, the sistrum. This was a handheld rattle with metal discs on crossbars. When shaken, it produced a bright, jingling, almost buzzing sound. It was strongly associated with the goddess Hathor, the deity of music, dance, and joy. The sound of the sistrum was believed to soothe angry gods, drive away evil spirits, and create a sacred space. Picture a procession of priestesses, all shaking their sistrums in unison, the bright metallic jingle cutting through the deep hum of the priest's chants. It's a soundscape of contrasts, the deep and the high, the human and the metallic, all working together to create an atmosphere of profound reverence and mystical power. Now let's travel eastward to the vibrant spiritual landscape of ancient India. The air here is filled with a different kind of sacred sound. Imagine a temple carved into a mountainside, its entrance adorned with intricate sculptures of gods and goddesses. As you approach, you hear the clear, resonant ringing of bells. Temple bells, or ghanta, were and still are a crucial part of Hindu worship. Devotees ring the bell upon entering the temple to announce their arrival to the deity and to chase away negative energies. The sound is sharp, clear, and said to quiet the human mind, helping to focus one's thoughts on the divine. The sound of the bell is believed to be Om, the primordial sound of creation itself. Inside, the air hums with the chanting of mantras, sacred Sanskrit verses repeated in a hypnotic rhythm. Unlike the deep Egyptian chants, these mantras often have a more melodic, flowing quality. The rhythmic repetition is a form of meditation, a way to align one's own vibrational energy with the energy of the universe. The soundscape is also enriched by the blowing of the conch shell, or shankha. Its powerful trumpet-like call announces the beginning of a ritual and is another sound believed to purify the environment. The combination of ringing bells, melodic chants, and the call of the conch creates an auditory tapestry that is both uplifting and deeply centering. Let's venture across the globe to the dense jungles of the Americas to explore the world of shamanic ritual. In many ancient cultures, from Siberia to the Amazon, the shaman was the bridge to the spirit world, and their primary tool was sound, specifically the rhythm of the drum. The shaman's drum was often seen as their steed, the vehicle on which they traveled to other realities. Imagine being in a dimly lit lodge, the only light from a central fire casting flickering shadows on the walls. The shaman begins to drum, a steady, hypnotic beat, 1, 2, 3, 4, over and over. This rhythmic drumming is not just music, it's a technology of consciousness. The consistent, driving beat can induce a trance-like state in both the shaman and the participants. It alters brainwave patterns, opening the mind to non-ordinary states of reality. The sound is visceral. You feel it in your chest, a heartbeat that connects everyone in the circle. The shaman might also use rattles made from gourds, shells, or animal hooves, adding a sharp, whispering texture to the sound. Their voice joins in, not with formal chants, but with sacred songs, calls to spirit allies, and imitations of animal sounds. This soundscape is raw, organic, and deeply immersive, designed to dissolve the boundaries of the self and open a doorway to the spirit world. Now we sail to the sun-drenched shores of ancient Greece. In the marble amphitheaters and hilltop sanctuaries dedicated to Apollo or Dionysus, music and religion were inseparable. Greek religious ceremonies were often accompanied by hymns, poetic songs of praise sung to the gods. Imagine a chorus of voices singing in unison, their melodies soaring on the wind, accompanied by the gentle, elegant plucking of the lyre. The lyre, a stringed instrument associated with Apollo, the god of music and reason, produced a clear, calming sound. The music was structured, based on mathematical principles, reflecting the Greek ideal of cosmic order and harmony. But Greek religion also had its wilder side. The rites of Dionysus, the god of wine and ecstasy, were a complete contrast. Here, the soundscape was chaotic and frenzied. Instead of the orderly lyre, you would hear the loud, piercing sound of the aloes, a double-reed pipe. Its shrill, reedy tone was designed to excite the senses and induce a state of ecstatic madness. Add to that the thunderous beat of large frame drums, called tympana, and the clashing of cymbals. The combination was a cacophony of wild energy, meant to break down social inhibitions and unite the worshippers in a collective, transcendent frenzy. The sounds of Greek religion ranged from the sublime and orderly to the wild and ecstatic, reflecting the complex and multifaceted nature of their gods. Finally, we cannot talk about the sounds of ancient ritual without addressing the darker, more unsettling aspects, such as sacrifice. Across many cultures, this was a central element of religious practice. The soundscape of a sacrificial ritual would have been intense and visceral. Imagine the scene, the low murmuring of prayers from the priests, the nervous energy of the assembled crowd. Then the sounds of the animal itself, perhaps the bleating of a sheep or the lowing of a bull. These sounds would be followed by the sharp, final cry of the creature, a sound that would hang heavy in the air. Added to this would be the crackle and hiss of the sacrificial fire as offerings were placed upon it, the sizzle of fat, the roar of the flames consuming the offering. These weren't sounds of everyday life. They were sounds charged with immense significance. They represented a transaction with the divine, a moment of profound and often violent transformation. These sounds were meant to be unsettling, to remind participants of the power of the gods and the seriousness of their pact. This auditory experience, though difficult for us to imagine, was a powerful and integral part of their spiritual reality. From the booming chants in Egyptian temples to the hypnotic drumming of shamans, the sounds of ancient religion were as diverse as the cultures that created them. Yet they all shared a common purpose: to transform an ordinary space into a sacred one, to alter consciousness, and to forge a connection with the divine. These soundscapes were not accidental. They were carefully crafted acoustic environments designed to evoke awe, transcendence, and a profound sense of the mystical. The next time you hear a bell ring or a chant being sung, remember that you are hearing an echo of these ancient practices, a sonic thread that connects us to the very first humans who looked up at the stars and felt the need to make a sound in reply. It's a difficult subject, but one that is crucial to understanding the full human experience of the past. So let's step cautiously onto the ancient battlefield and try to comprehend the overwhelming soundscape of war. Imagine for a moment you are standing on a hill overlooking a vast plain. The air, once still, begins to tremble. It starts as a low rumble, a vibration you feel in your chest more than you hear with your ears. This is the sound of thousands upon thousands of sandaled feet marching in unison, a human earthquake moving with singular, terrifying purpose. It's the sound of an army on the move, a living, breathing entity of bronze and leather. Then the horns blow. Not the gentle, melodic instruments of the temple, but long, brazen horns that blast raw, guttural notes across the valley. These aren't calls to prayer. They are calls to arms, signals that cut through the morning mist, designed to intimidate, to coordinate, and to announce that the time for words has passed. Each blast sends a shiver down your spine, a primal warning of the chaos about to be unleashed. And then comes the human voice multiplied by the thousands, the war cry. It erupts from the advancing lines, a cacophony of shouts, roars, and chants. It's not just noise, it's a psychological weapon, a way for soldiers to build their own courage while shattering the resolve of their enemies. Think of the Gaelic Alba Giu Brath, the guttural cries of Germanic tribes, or the unified shouts of a Roman legion. Each one is a wall of sound, a declaration of identity and deadly intent, rolling towards the opposing line like an unstoppable wave. As the armies get closer, a new sound joins the mix, a high-pitched, menacing whistle. Then another and another, until the sky is filled with a deadly hiss. This is the sound of arrows being loosed, not one by one, but in great volleys. Hundreds, sometimes thousands, of arrows arcing through the air, a swarm of death raining down. You'd hear the collective twang of bowstrings being released, a sound like a giant, sinister harp being plucked, followed by that terrifying whistle as the shafts fly towards their targets. And then the impact, the moment the two lines collide. The sound is instantaneous and brutal. It's not the clean clang you see in movies. It's a messy, horrifying crash. The primary sound is the sickening thud of wood on wood as heavy shields slam into each other. You hear the splintering of ash and oak, the deep thump of a shield wall holding its ground, and the desperate heaving and shoving of men pushing for their lives. It's a visceral, grinding percussion that forms the very rhythm of the battle. Beneath this percussive roar of shields, you hear the sharp, metallic clash of weapons. Bronze swords striking bronze shields, iron blades glancing off iron helmets. It's a high, high-pitched, frantic sound, a sharp shing of a sword being drawn, the chack of a short sword finding its mark, the heavy thwack of an axe biting into a wooden shield. Every single clash represents a life-or-death struggle, a desperate dance where a single mistake means silence. And mixed in with the clash of steel is the dull, sickening thud of weapons hitting flesh and bone. Let's not forget the cavalry and the chariots. Imagine the thunder of 100 war horses galloping across the field. It's not a graceful sound. It's a chaotic stampede, the ground shaking under their hooves. Now add the rattle and creak of wooden chariots bouncing over uneven terrain, the wheels groaning under the strain, the jingle of harnesses, and the shouts of the drivers urging their horses on. A chariot charge would have been a terrifying spectacle of noise and speed, a force of nature designed to break enemy formations and sow panic. In the midst of this overwhelming chaos, you would hear individual human sounds, the desperate shouts of commanders, their voices raw from trying to be heard over the din. Hold the line, advance, reform. These were lifelines of order in a sea of pandemonium. And then there are the sounds we instinctively block out, the sharp cries of pain as a spear finds its target, the low groans of the wounded lying on the ground, and the short, final gasps of the dying. These are the most chilling sounds of all, the terrible personal cost of war, audible even amidst the symphony of destruction. If the battle involved a siege, the soundscape would become even more industrial and destructive. Imagine the deep groan of a catapult's twisted ropes being pulled taut, followed by a sudden violent thwump as it releases its payload. You'd hear the heavy stone whistling through the air, a terrifying few seconds of anticipation before the devastating crash as it smashes into a stone wall, sending dust and debris flying. The rhythmic thud, dot, dot, thud, dot, 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 thud of a battering ram striking a gate would be a relentless, morale-breaking drum beat, each impact a promise of the breach to come. The splintering of massive wooden gates, the screech of metal on stone as siege towers are pushed forward, the terrible grinding sound of a wall collapsing, these were the sounds of a city being torn apart. This brutal symphony of human desperation and destructive power was the reality of ancient conflict. It's a soundscape we are fortunate to only have to imagine. By listening to these echoes, we don't glorify the violence. Instead, we gain a deeper, more sobering respect for the past and for the enduring human cost of war. It reminds us of the fragility of peace and the immense suffering that these sounds represented. Imagine this, you're standing in a field just outside an ancient village. The air is cool. The most dominant sound is the rhythmic, hypnotic chirping of crickets, an endless chorus that defines the summer night. It's a sound so fundamental, it's almost like the pulse of the darkness itself. Then, cutting through that gentle drone, the low, resonant hoot of an owl echoes from a nearby grove of trees. It's a sound that's both beautiful and slightly eerie, a reminder that the night belongs to its own set of creatures. In the distance, a sound that raises the hairs on your arms, the lonely, mournful howl of a wolf, a stark signal of the untamed wilderness that lies just beyond the circle of human settlement. For our ancestors, these weren't just background noises. They were vital pieces of information about the world around them. The owl's call might signal a good hunting night, while the wolf's howl was a clear warning to stay close to the safety of the fire. Transition to a view of a dimly lit ancient town or city at night. Now let's step into an ancient city after dark, a place like Rome or Athens. The cacophony of the day has faded, but silence is a luxury that doesn't truly exist. The city breathes, even in its sleep. As we walk down these narrow, moonlit cobblestone streets, our ears become our primary guides. Listen. You can hear the sudden, sharp bark of a dog from a nearby courtyard, answering another bark from across the block. It's a primitive security system, a network of canine sentinels. From an upper window, a faint melody drifts down. Someone is softly strumming a lyre, perhaps unable to sleep, or maybe it's the lingering sound from a symposium, a late-night gathering of friends. It's a ghost of the day's sociability, a thread of music weaving through the quiet. Focus on a single, humble dwelling. Let's pause here, outside this simple home. If we listen closely, we can hear the gentle, rhythmic sounds of life within. The soft, whistling snore of someone deep in slumber, a sound of peaceful vulnerability. Maybe a baby cries for a moment before being soothed back to sleep. These are the intimate, human sounds that filled the ancient night, a testament to the cycles of family and rest that have remained unchanged for millennia. The darkness amplified everything. A dropped pot, a cough from a neighbor, a closing door. Every sound traveled further and held more significance without the constant drone of modern life to mask it. Show a night watchman with a lantern walking the streets, and what's that sound? The steady, deliberate tread of footsteps on stone, accompanied by the occasional tap of a staff. That's the night watchman, the *Vigiles* of Rome, making his rounds. His presence is a sound of reassurance and authority in the deep dark. His footsteps are a rhythm of safety, a declaration that even in the most profound blackness there is order. Hearing him pass by your window would be a comfort, a signal that someone was looking out for the sleeping city. These men were the human equivalent of the barking dogs their senses honed to pick up any sound that was out of place, a furtive whisper, the scrape of a lock being forced, or the muffled footfalls of someone trying to move unseen. In a world cloaked in shadow, the ear was the ultimate sentinel. Visuals transitioned to a group of people around a crackling bonfire. The absence of light didn't just create dangers. It fostered a unique kind of community. The most powerful beacon in the ancient night was the fire, and around the fire a different world of sound was born. The crackle and pop of the burning wood is a sound of warmth, safety, and gathering. It's a hypnotic percussion that draws people in. Around these flames, voices would drop to a more intimate tone. This was the time for storytelling. An elder's voice, raspy and full of character, would spin tales of gods, heroes, and monsters, their words painting vivid pictures in the minds of the listeners, whose faces were illuminated by the flickering light. The gasps of the children, the low laughter of the adults, the shared silence during a moment of suspense, these were the sounds of culture being passed down, of bonds being forged in the shared darkness. The fire was the television, the radio, and the heart of the community, all in one. Show a more secretive, dimly lit scene, perhaps two people talking in a dark alley or garden. But the night also held secrets. Under the cloak of darkness, away from the communal fire, conversations took a different turn. The night was the time for hushed whispers, for secret plans and clandestine meetings. Lovers would murmur promises to each other in secluded gardens, their words carried on the gentle night breeze. Conspirators would plot in shadowy corners, their voices low and urgent. The darkness provided a curtain of anonymity. Without the scrutiny of daylight, people felt freer to speak their minds, to share their deepest fears or most ambitious desires. The sounds of these secret conversations, the soft shushing, the intense low frequency, of urgent speech, were as much a part of the nocturnal soundscape as the cricket east chirp, a hidden layer of human drama playing out while most of the world slept. Scene widens to a vast, starry sky over an ancient landscape. Think about it. In our world, our eyes are constantly bombarded with light and information. But for our ancestors, once the sun went down, their ears took over. Their auditory sense was sharpened to a degree we can barely imagine. They could likely tell the difference between the footsteps of a friend and a stranger, identify a specific animal by its call from a great distance, or gauge the mood of the city just by the ambient sounds drifting through their window. The night was not an absence of sensory input. It was a shift to a different, more ancient, and arguably more profound way of experiencing the world. It was a time when listening was not a passive activity, but an active, essential skill for survival, for connection, and for understanding the mysteries that the darkness held. The stars emerged, and the world began to speak in a language of sound. The sounds we'll explore today are the very heartbeat of ancient creativity and industry. So close your eyes and let your imagination transport you. We're entering a potter's studio. The air is thick with the earthy scent of wet clay. The dominant sound here is the steady, rhythmic whirring of the potter's wheel, a constant hum powered by a foot pedal. Against that backdrop, you hear the gentle, wet slapping sound as the potter centers the clay, their hands expertly shaping the lump. Listen closely for the soft, scraping noise as they use a tool to trim excess clay, and the satisfying thump as the finished pot is carefully lifted from the wheel. This space is a symphony of subtle sounds, a dance between human touch and spinning earth. Now imagine the intense heat radiating from the kiln. The sound here is a low, powerful roar, like a captured inferno. You'd hear the crackle of wood or charcoal fueling the fire, a constant, hungry sound. As the pottery bakes inside, you might hear the faint, high-pitched hiss as the last bits of moisture escape the clay. The air shimmers with heat, and the constant hum of the fire is a testament to this crucial, transformative process. It's a sound of both creation and potential destruction, where a moment's inattention could ruin days of work. It's the sound of alchemy, turning soft clay into durable, lasting ceramic. Let's move to a different kind of workshop, one filled with sparkle and precision, the jeweler's bench. The sounds here are delicate, sharp, and focused. You'd hear the tiny, metallic snip of wire cutters and the high-pitched ping as small pieces of metal are dropped onto a tray. The most distinct sound might be the rhythmic, gentle tapping of a small hammer against a chisel as intricate designs are chased into a gold or silver bracelet. Listen for the soft, abrasive scratch of a file smoothing an edge, and the whispery clinking of beads being strung together on a thread. This is a soundscape of immense patience and meticulous detail, where every tiny noise signifies a step towards creating a precious treasure. Now we find ourselves in the carpenter's domain. The air is fragrant with the smell of freshly cut wood. The most powerful sound is the rhythmic, grating rasp of a saw cutting through a plank, a steady back and forth that requires strength and control. This is punctuated by the sharp, authoritative blows of a mallet striking a chisel, carving out a joint with a deep thok, thock, thock. You'd also hear the smooth, shaving sound of a hand plane gliding across a surface, peeling away paper-thin curls of wood. The workshop is filled with the resonance of timber, from the hollow knock of a finished chest to the clatter of wood scraps falling to the floor. It's a robust, organic sound filled with the promise of structure and form. From wood, we move to metal. The blacksmith's forge is a place of primal energy, a cacophony of fire and force. The first thing you hear is the roar of the bellows, a deep, rhythmic whoosh of air being forced into the fire, making the coals glow with a fierce, white-hot intensity. The defining sound, of course, is the deafening, ringing clang of the hammer striking red-hot iron on the anvil. Each strike is a sharp, percussive explosion of sound that echoes through the workshop. Interspersed with this is a high-pitched sizzle and hiss as the blacksmith quenches the glowing metal in a trough of water, sending a plume of steam into the air. It's a raw, powerful, and utterly captivating orchestra of creation. Let's step into a quieter, more rhythmic space, the weaver's studio. The dominant sound here is the steady, hypnotic clack-clack of the loom. You hear the soft swish of the shuttle as it flies back and forth between the threads of the warp. There is a creak from the wooden frame as the weaver presses the foot pedals to change the shed, followed by the satisfying thump of the beater pressing the newly woven line of thread into place. It's a consistent, almost meditative rhythm. This is the sound of threads interlocking, of color and pattern emerging from a simple collection of yarns. It's a sound that has clothed civilizations, a testament to patience and the quiet magic of turning fiber into fabric. Our final stop is the leatherworker's shop. The air has a rich animalic scent. The sounds here are more subdued, but just as distinct. You hear the heavy slap of a large hide being laid out on a workbench. This is followed by the precise slicing sound of a sharp knife cutting through the tough material. The most rhythmic sound is the tap-tap-tap of an awl punching holes for stitching, followed by the soft zip of a waxed thread being pulled tight through the leather. You might also hear the burnisher rubbing against an edge, a fast, friction-filled sound that smooths and seals the leather. It's a soundscape of durability and craftsmanship, of turning a raw hide into something strong, useful, and built to last. These workshops were the engines of ancient economies and the cradles of culture. The sounds we've heard today, the potter's wheel, the blacksmith's hammer, the weaver's loom, were the daily soundtrack for countless skilled individuals. Their dedication, focus, and ingenuity are literally embedded in the objects they created, many of which we can still see and touch today. Hearing these sounds helps us connect not just with the objects, but with the very people who made them, appreciating the human effort behind every pot, every jewel, and every piece of cloth. Imagine you're standing on the deck of a Phoenician trading vessel a few thousand years ago. The first thing you'd notice isn't a sound but a feeling, the constant, gentle rocking of the ship, a cradle on the vast blue expanse. Now, listen. Hear that deep, resonant groaning? That's the voice of the ship itself. It's the sound of massive wooden beams, timbers, and planks, all bound together with ropes and dowels, straining and flexing against the immense pressure of the water. Each creak tells a story of the forest it came from, the hands that shaped it, and the journeys it has endured. It's a living, breathing entity, and its groans are a constant reminder that you are a tiny speck of humanity, held afloat by craftsmanship and courage. As the wind picks up, a new symphony begins. Listen to the high-pitched whistle as the breeze slices through the rigging, the complex web of ropes that holds the mast and sail. It's a sound that can change in an instant, from a soft hum to a desperate shriek and a sudden squall. And beneath that, the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. It's the ocean's heartbeat, a constant companion on any voyage. In calm weather, it's a gentle, lulling percussion. But in a storm, it becomes a thunderous, violent drumming, a relentless assault that tests the nerve of every sailor and the integrity of the ship. These aren't just background noises. They are vital signs telling the crew about the weather, the sea's mood, and the ship's condition. But the ship isn't a ghost vessel. It's alive with human activity. Hear that? The strained shouts of sailors, their voices carried on the wind. Heave, heave. They're hauling on thick, coarse ropes, their muscles burning as they work in unison to raise a heavy sail or pull in a net laden with fish. Their calls are a form of communication, a rhythmic chant that coordinates their efforts. It's the sound of teamwork, of pure physical power pitted against the forces of nature. Now, listen for the sharp crack of the sail as it catches the wind, a sudden, explosive sound like a giant whip, signaling that the ship is now harnessing the power of the breeze and surging forward. Every sound tells a part of the story of this floating community. Let's imagine our ship is a different kind of vessel, an ancient Greek trireme, a warship powered by 3 banks of rowers. The primary sound here isn't the wind, but the disciplined rhythm of human effort. Listen to the deep, steady beat of the calousts, the officer who keeps time, pounding a large drum or a wooden block. B-O-O-M, boom, dot, dot, boom. It's a relentless, hypnotic pulse that drives the rowers. And with each beat, you hear the synchronized splash and pull of hundreds of oars entering the water. A soft asterisk thump asterisk as the wooden oars hit the water, followed by a long asterisk swoosh asterisk as they pull through it, and the creak of the oarlocks. It's the sound of a perfectly tuned human engine, a machine made of muscle and sweat, propelling the galley forward with incredible speed and precision. This sound would have struck fear into the hearts of their enemies. Now our journey takes us towards the coast, towards one of the bustling hubs of the ancient world, a harbor, perhaps Alexandria or ancient Rome's port of Ostia. The soundscape changes dramatically. The relative quiet of the open sea is replaced by a cacophony of human industry. Long before we even see the docks, we hear the distant, continuous roar of waves crashing against a sea wall or a rocky shore, a natural warning to all approaching sailors. The cries of seabirds become louder, more frantic, as they squabble over scraps of fish and refuse from the city. These are the sounds that signal our arrival, the transition from the wild sea back to the world of civilization. As we draw closer, the human sounds overwhelm everything else. Hear the shouts of the dock workers, the stevedores, their voices a mix of different languages and dialects from across the known world. They're calling out to each other, haggling, and directing the chaos of loading and unloading. Listen to the heavy, grating creak of wooden cranes, powered by human treadmills, as they lift massive amphorae filled with wine and olive oil from the ship's hold. You can hear the dull thud of cargo being set down on the stone quay, the clatter of pottery, the rumble of wooden carts being pulled over cobblestones by straining oxen. It's a messy, loud, and incredibly vibrant symphony of commerce. Let's drop anchor. Listen to the roar of the heavy chain links rattling out through the hawsehole, a thunderous metallic sound that announces the ship's arrival to the entire port. It ends with a tremendous splash as the anchor hits the water, followed by the deep, gurgling sound of it sinking to the seabed to find its grip. This single sequence of sounds signals the end of a long, perilous journey and the beginning of trade, replenishment, and a brief respite on solid ground. For the sailors, it is the most welcomed sound in the world, the sound of safety, of arrival, of home, even if just for a little while. These sounds, the groan of the hull, the song of the wind, the rhythm of the oars, and the hubbub of the harbor, are more than just echoes from the past. They speak of a fundamental human story, our relationship with the sea. They tell of our courage to face the unknown, our ingenuity in building vessels that could cross it, and our unceasing drive to connect, to trade, and to explore. The sea was a barrier that separated lands, but it was the sounds of maritime life that proved it could also be a highway that connected them. It was a world built on bravery, sweat, and a deep understanding of the language of the wind and waves. Next time you find yourself near the water, take a moment. Close your eyes and try to listen past the sounds of the modern world. Try to hear the faint creak of a wooden ship, the rhythmic pull of oars, the distant shouts of sailors on a voyage into the great unknown. You'll be listening to one of the oldest and most powerful stories of humanity. In a world without printers or pixels, how was information recorded, taught, and preserved? Let's listen to the soundscapes of ancient libraries, schools, and the workshops of scribes, where the pursuit of learning created its own unique auditory signature. These were the intellectual hubs of their time, places where silence and sound danced in a delicate balance to shape the minds of generations. From the hushed halls of Alexandria to the bustling schools of Rome, and the dusty workshops of Egyptian scribes, every rustle, whisper, and tap tells a story of human intellect at work. So quiet down, and let's lend an ear to the past. First, let us step into the hallowed halls of one of the wonders of the ancient world, the great library of Alexandria. Imagine a vast complex, not just a single building, but a sanctuary for scholars. The overwhelming sound here isn't noise, but a profound, reverent quiet. It's a silence filled with potential, punctuated by the soft, subtle sounds of thought. Listen closely. Can you hear it? That gentle, crisp rustling is the sound of papyrus scrolls being carefully unrolled and rolled back up. Each scroll, a treasure trove of literature, science, or philosophy, makes this delicate sound as it's consulted. Scholars would walk softly on stone floors, their sandals making a faint, shuffling sound. The air would be filled with hushed whispers, barely audible murmurs, as academics from across the known world debated complex ideas in hushed tones, careful not to disturb the intense concentration around them. These weren't sounds of interruption, but the very pulse of intellectual exchange. Now, lean in a little closer. What's that faint, rhythmic scratching? That's the sound of a stylus on a wax tablet. Many scholars would carry these personal, reusable notepads. When an idea struck or a passage needed to be copied, they'd use a pointed stylus, often made of metal or bone, to etch notes into a thin layer of wax set in a wooden frame. The scratching would be light and precise. When the notes were no longer needed, they'd use the flat end of the stylus to smooth the wax over, creating a fresh surface. This constant, quiet scratching was the soundtrack of personal study and scholarly annotation, a testament to the fleeting nature of a thought captured and refined. Imagine hundreds of scholars, each in their own world of study, creating a subtle symphony of scratching and rustling papyrus. This was the sound of knowledge being consumed, considered, and catalogued. But these great libraries were more than just silent repositories. They were living institutions. Occasionally, the quiet would be broken by a more distinct sound. A scholar, having made a breakthrough, might audibly gasp or let out a low exclamation of Eureka. In Greek, you might hear the distant, resonant voice of a famous philosopher delivering a lecture in a designated hall, his words echoing softly down the colonnades. There would be the soft thud of wooden scroll cases being placed on shelves, or the gentle clinking of clay oil lamps being tended to by library staff, ensuring the flame of knowledge and the literal flames for light never went out. These sounds, though infrequent, reminded everyone that this was a place of active, dynamic discovery, not a dusty, forgotten archive. The silence was the canvas, but these sounds were the brush strokes of intellectual life. Now let us leave the quiet reverence of the library and step into a much livelier environment, an ancient school, perhaps in Rome or Athens. The soundscape here is completely different. Forget the hush. The dominant sound is the human voice multiplied. The most common sound would be the drone of students reciting their lessons in unison. Imagine a room of boys chanting multiplication tables, passages from Homer's Iliad, or lines of Virgil's Aeneid. This method, known as choral recitation, was believed to hammer knowledge into the memory. The sound would rise and fall in a steady, monotonous rhythm, a constant hum of learning that would spill out into the street. It wasn't about quiet contemplation. It was about audible, repetitive drill. This chorus of young voices was the quintessential sound of ancient education. Over this drone, you'd hear the sharp, clear voice of the teacher, the asterisk, grammaticus asterisk, or asterisk literator asterisk. He would cut through the students chanting to correct a mispronunciation, shouting a name, Marcus again with feeling, or clapping his hands to bring the class back to attention. His voice was the instrument of authority and discipline was often physical. Another sharp, distinct sound in the ancient classroom was the stinging crack of a cane or switch against a palm or backside. While unpleasant to our modern ears, this was a common part of the sonic environment, a sharp reminder to stay focused. You'd also hear the rhythmic tapping of a teacher's staff on the floor to keep time during recitation, a percussive beat underlying the chorus of voices driving the lesson forward. Beyond the voices, there were other sounds of study. Just like in the libraries, the scratching of a stylus on a wax tablet was ever present. But here it was less refined, perhaps more frantic, as students hurried to copy down lessons. You'd hear the tablets clattering as they were passed around or dropped on wooden benches. In more advanced schools, you might hear the crinkle of papyrus as students learned to read from actual scrolls. There was no dedicated school building as we know it. Classes often took place in a rented room, an open portico, or even a quiet corner of the public forum. So the sounds of the school would constantly mingle with the sounds of the city, the rumble of carts, the calls of street vendors, the general hum of urban life, creating a chaotic yet vibrant symphony of education blending with the everyday world. Finally, let's travel back even further in time and to a different place, to the scribal chambers of Mesopotamia, or ancient Egypt. These were the engine rooms of civilization, the places where laws, histories, and accounts were given permanence. In a Mesopotamian asterisk, Idoba asterisk, or tablet house, the primary sound would be the gentle squish and tap of a reed stylus on wet clay. Scribes would press the wedge-shaped tip of the reed into soft clay tablets to create cuneiform script. Each press made a soft, percussive mark. Imagine a room full of scribes, each working diligently, creating a complex rhythmic tapping, like a room of quiet, focused woodpeckers. There would be the sound of water being sprinkled on clay to keep it moist, and the heavier thud of finished, damp tablets being stacked carefully to dry in the sun before being baked in a kiln. In Egypt, the sound was different. Here, the primary medium was papyrus. The dominant sound in a scribe's workshop would be the whisper-soft brush strokes of a reed brush on the papyrus sheet. Scribes used brushes made from reeds, chewed at the end to separate the fibers, which they would dip into palettes of black and red ink. The sound was a delicate, fluid sheen as the brush moved across the textured surface, a much softer and more continuous sound than the sharp tapping on clay. You'd hear the light clink of the brush against the stone or ceramic palette as the scribe picked up more ink. There would also be the crisp rustle of papyrus sheets being handled, and the occasional scrape of a stone burnisher being rubbed over the sheet to smooth it for writing. It was a soundscape of immense precision and delicate control. These scribal chambers were spaces of intense focus, but also of apprenticeship. Alongside the master scribes, young apprentices would be practicing their craft. So mixed in with the professional sounds, you'd hear the clumsy scrapes of a beginner, the frustrated sigh, and the low, instructional voice of the master guiding his student's hand. No, the curve is gentler, like the arc of a lotus flower, whether on clay, papyrus, or even chiseled into stone for monumental inscriptions, a much louder, sharper clang. And chip the sounds of the scribe with the sounds of civilization recording its own memory. These were not just noises. They were the audible act of creating history, one careful mark at a time. The sounds of knowledge were the very foundation upon which empires were built and legacies were preserved. Have you ever wondered what life was like for the vast majority of people in the ancient world? While we often focus on the grand monuments and bustling streets of ancient cities, the truth is, most people lived far from that reality. Their lives weren't defined by politics or philosophy, but by the rising sun, the changing seasons, and the earth beneath their feet. Today we're leaving the city walls behind. We're traveling back in time to the countryside to discover the forgotten rhythms and sounds of rural life. Imagine waking up, not to the clamor of a city market, but to the single, piercing cry of a rooster. It's a sound that slices through the pre-dawn stillness, a natural alarm clock signaling the start of another day of labor. As the first hints of light spill over the horizon, other sounds join the chorus. From a nearby field, the deep, resonant lowing of cattle echoes, a gentle giant stirring from its rest. Closer by, you hear the softer, more numerous bleats of a flock of sheep, their woolly bodies jostling together as they're led out to pasture for the day. And from a muddy sty, the playful, high-pitched squeals of pigs add a note of chaotic energy to the morning's symphony. This isn't just background noise. This is the heartbeat of the ancient world. The sun is higher now, and the air fills with the sounds of work. The fields, which stretch out as far as the eye can see, are a hive of activity. In one, you hear the sharp, rhythmic asterisk, swish dash, swish dash, swish asterisk of scythes cutting through stalks of wheat. It's a sound of practiced efficiency, of men and women moving in unison, their bodies attuned to the task of harvest. It's a sound of sustenance, of gathering the grain that will feed their families through the coming winter. Each sweep of the blade is a prayer for a good yield. In another field, the soil is being prepared for a new crop. Here, the sound is different. It's a dull, earthy asterisk, thud, dot, 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 dot. Thud asterisk, the sound of hoes striking the ground, breaking up compacted earth, turning it over to breathe. It's a slower, more deliberate rhythm. It's a sound of hope and preparation, of investing labor now for a reward that is months away. It speaks of a deep, almost intimate connection with the land, understanding its textures, its needs, its potential. Every strike is a promise to the future. And what about water? In a world without pipes or faucets, water was life, and getting it to the crops was a constant challenge. Listen closely. Can you hear that steady, rhythmic creak? It might be a large wooden water wheel turned by the current of a river or by a patient donkey walking in endless circles. With each rotation, it lifts precious water from its source and pours it into an irrigation channel. Or perhaps the sound is the groan and swing of a shadoof, a simple but ingenious counterweighted lever used to lift buckets of water from a well or river. Asterisk squeak, dot, 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 splash, dot, dot, pour. Asterisk, it's a monotonous, repetitive sound, the soundtrack to an endless, back-breaking task. Yet it's also the sound of life itself, of turning arid land into a flourishing green paradise. It's the sound of human ingenuity overcoming the challenges of nature. But life wasn't only about labor. The village itself had its own unique soundscape, one that was gentler and more personal. Step away from the fields and listen. You can hear the high-pitched laughter and shouts of children. They aren't in a school or playing with manufactured toys. They're playing in the dirt paths between the houses, chasing chickens, and making up games with sticks and stones. Their joyful noise is a constant, vibrant thread woven into the fabric of daily life. It's a sound of innocence and the simple, uncomplicated happiness of childhood. And then there's the chatter of the community. Women gathered at the village well, their voices mingling with the splash of water as they filled their clay pots. They exchange news, share gossip, offer support. Men, mending tools or fences, call out to each other across the small yards. It's a world where everyone knows everyone. There's no anonymity here. The sounds of conversation, of shared stories, of communal living, create a dense web of connection. This constant, low hum of human interaction was the social glue that held these small communities together, providing comfort, security, and a sense of belonging. This was a gentler, yet equally complex, soundscape compared to the city. The seasons, too, had their own distinct voices, and for people whose lives depended on them, these sounds were as significant as any spoken word. Imagine the sound of spring. It's not just the birds returning. It's the powerful rush and gurgle of a river swollen with melting snow, a sound of release and raw power after the silence of winter. It's the sound of new life, of the world waking up. It carries the promise of growth and abundance. Then comes the sound of summer, the constant, high-pitched buzz of insects in the warm air, a sound so pervasive it almost becomes a form of silence. It's the backdrop to long days of work under a hot sun. Then the world begins to change again. The sound of autumn arrives. It's the crisp, dry rustle of leaves underfoot as you walk through a grove. It's the whisper of the wind carrying the first chill of the coming cold. It's a sound of completion, of the harvest being brought in, of the earth preparing to rest. It's a beautiful, slightly melancholy sound that signals a time of transition. And finally, winter. Perhaps the most profound sound of all is the silence of a heavy snowfall, a deep, muffled quiet that blankets the entire world. The usual sounds of the village are soft and distant. The world seems to hold its breath. In this quiet, families would have gathered closer together around the hearth, the crackle of the fire becoming the dominant sound. This profound silence wasn't empty. It was a time for rest, for storytelling, for mending and making a necessary pause in the cycle of the year. For these ancient people, the sounds of the seasons were not just background noise. They were an intimate part of their existence, a calendar they could hear, feel, and understand in their very bones. So as we listen back across the centuries, we hear more than just the sounds of farming. We hear the story of humanity's relationship with the natural world. We hear the rhythm of hard work, the comfort of community, and the profound influence of the changing seasons. This was the life lived by the vast majority of our ancestors. A life of toil, yes, but also one of deep connection, simple joys, and a quiet dignity. It was a life lived in tune with the earth, a symphony of survival and perseverance. The air is thick with the sounds of celebration, a stark and wonderful contrast to the structured noises of work and survival. These were the moments when societies let loose, and the soundscape exploded with life. At the very heart of any ancient celebration was, of course, the music. But we're not talking about a solo musician playing quietly in a corner. Think bigger. Picture a grand procession moving through the streets. You'd hear the soaring, sweet notes of flutes and the resonant plucking of lyres and harps. These weren't just random tunes. They were compositions designed to stir the soul and lift the spirits of everyone who heard them. The music set the pace, the mood, and the very rhythm of the festival. But string and wind instruments were just the beginning. To truly get the party started, you needed rhythm. Imagine the powerful, deep thumping of drums and the sharp, percussive clash of cymbals. These instruments weren't just for keeping time. They were for creating an infectious energy that made it impossible not to move. Drummers would create complex, driving beats that you could feel in your chest, compelling the crowds to dance and clap along. It was a physical, visceral experience that connected everyone in the celebration. And what about the brass? The piercing, triumphant blast of a trumpet or a horn would cut through the air, announcing the start of the festivities or the arrival of an important dignitary. In a world without loudspeakers, these powerful instruments were the ultimate attention grabbers. Their sound was a call to gather, a signal that something momentous was happening. It was a sound of authority, yes, but also one of collective excitement. Hearing that blast would send a shiver of anticipation down your spine. Of course, a celebration isn't just about the instruments. It's about the human voice. The air would be filled with the sound of exuberant singing and chanting. These weren't shy, mumbled songs. This was full-throated, joyous singing from hundreds, sometimes thousands, of people at once. The songs would tell stories of gods, heroes, or harvests, uniting everyone in a shared cultural narrative. The sheer volume and passion of a crowd singing in unison would have been an incredibly powerful and moving experience, a true sound of community. Now, let's zoom in from the public square to a more intimate setting, like a grand banquet or a wedding feast. The soundscape here shifts slightly but is no less festive. Listen closely. You can hear the constant, cheerful clinking of drinking vessels, be it ceramic cups, silver goblets, or simple wooden bowls, as toasts are made and drinks are shared. This sound is the auditory signature of shared hospitality and good cheer. It's a sound that says, "We are together, and we are celebrating." And what's a feast without conversation? The room would be buzzing with animated chatter and, most importantly, laughter. Not polite chuckles, but deep, hearty-bellied laughs echoing off the walls. This was the sound of people connecting, sharing jokes, telling stories, and simply enjoying each other's company. In a time before digital distractions, conversation was the primary form of entertainment, and the sound of a hall filled with happy voices was the ultimate sign of a successful gathering. Let's not forget the sound of dancing. Whether it was a structured group dance at a religious ceremony or a spontaneous, joyful outburst at a wedding, the sounds of dance were integral to the festive atmosphere. You'd hear the rhythmic stomping and shuffling of feet on stone floors or packed earth. You'd hear the swish and swirl of garments as dancers spun and moved. It was a visual and auditory spectacle, a physical expression of the music and the joy that filled the air. Every type of celebration had its own unique auditory signature. Public games, for instance, would be a cacophony of roaring crowds, the thundering of chariot wheels, and the shouts of vendors selling snacks. A religious holiday might be characterized by solemn chants and the ringing of sacred bells, creating a soundscape of reverence and awe. Personal milestones like a coming-of-age ceremony or a wedding would blend music, laughter, and heartfelt speeches, creating a deeply personal and emotional auditory memory for all involved. These sounds of celebration were more than just noise. They were the sound of community bonding, of shared identity, and of collective release. In these moments, the strict hierarchies and routines of daily life temporarily dissolved. People from different walks of life came together, united by the music, the food, and the sheer joy of the occasion. It was during these festivals that the structured sounds of the ancient world gave way to a beautiful, glorious, and unrestrained revelry. It was the sound of life being lived to its fullest. Let's start in the heart of it all, the throne room. Picture this, a vast, opulent chamber. The air is thick with a hushed reverence. The dominant sound? Silence. A deliberate, heavy silence designed to inspire awe and intimidation. The only things that dared to break it were the solemn pronouncements of the ruler, their voice echoing with unquestionable authority. Think about the subtle sounds filling that silence. The quiet, almost imperceptible shuffling of courtiers, careful not to make a sound that could be misinterpreted as disrespect. The soft, padded footsteps of servants moving like ghosts along the periphery. The rustle of rich fabrics, silk, linen, and brocade as people bowed and moved with practiced grace. Even the distant, rhythmic clatter of guards' armor or the thud of their spears against marble floors served as a constant, underlying reminder of the ruler's protected and unassailable status. These weren't just random noises. They were part of a carefully orchestrated performance of power. Now, let's move from the throne room to the judicial courts. Here, the atmosphere was different. but no less controlled. The primary sounds were human voices, each with a specific role and weight. Imagine the measured, deliberate tones of a judge, each word carrying the force of law. Their voice would cut through the tension, calm and unwavering. Then you'd hear the pleas of petitioners, their voices often laced with desperation or hope, carefully modulated to win sympathy without appearing defiant. Opposite them, the advocates and orators would command the space with their powerful, trained voices. In ancient Rome, for instance, a skilled orator like Cicero could hold a court captive. The rise and fall of their arguments, the strategic pauses, the changes in volume and pitch, it was a vocal symphony designed to persuade and dominate the auditory landscape of the courtroom. The collective gasp of the onlookers, the scratching of a scribe's stylus on a wax tablet, the final, decisive bang of a gavel or staff, all these sounds contributed to a formal, often tense environment where fates were decided. But power wasn't always quiet and subtle. It also announced itself with thunderous fanfare. Think of a royal procession. Before you even saw the king or emperor, you heard them. The piercing blast of trumpets, perhaps the deep thrum of drums, would cut through the daily noise of the city, demanding that everyone stop and pay attention. This wasn't just music. It was a sonic bulldozer clearing a path for majesty. The roar of the crowd, carefully managed, would swell in response. It was a dialogue between the ruler and the ruled, spoken in sound. Public decrees were another powerful acoustic tool. A herald standing on a platform in the city square wouldn't just read a new law. They would project it with a booming voice, trained to carry over the bustle of the marketplace. This act of voicing the law was critical. It transformed written words on a scroll into a living, binding command that entered the ears and thus the minds of the populace. The sound of the decree was the sound of the state imposing its will. Let's consider the architecture itself. The very design of these spaces was a form of acoustic engineering. The high ceilings and stone walls of a throne room were built to create echoes, amplifying the ruler's voice to godlike proportions, while swallowing the sounds of lesser mortals. The open-air design of a Roman forum allowed the voices of orators to carry to thousands. These weren't accidental acoustic properties. They were intentional designs to manipulate sound for political purposes. The echo in a grand hall wasn't just an echo. It was the resonance of power itself. The materials used also played a role. The clank of ceremonial armor wasn't the same as the clank of a common soldier's gear. It was often made of polished bronze or steel, designed to catch the light and produce a cleaner, more resonant sound. The heavy wooden doors of a council chamber wouldn't just creak. They would groan with a deep, authoritative finality when shut, signaling that a weighty decision had been made and the matter was closed. Every object, from a scepter striking the floor to a scroll being unrolled, had its own unique, power-laden sound. Imagine being a foreign emissary visiting the imperial court in China's Forbidden City. You would be guided through a series of gates and courtyards, each with its own soundscape. The journey was a sonic progression, moving from the noise of the outside world to the profound, controlled quiet near the emperor. The ringing of bells, the striking of chimes, the carefully choreographed footsteps, it was all designed to mentally prepare and humble the visitor before they even laid eyes on the Son of Heaven. The sound, or the strategic absence of it, told you everything you needed to know about your place in the hierarchy. So the sounds of power in the ancient world were a complex tapestry, woven from silence, speech, music, and noise. They were sounds designed to command respect, inspire awe, and ensure obedience. They reinforced social structures and turned abstract concepts like authority and law into a tangible sensory experience. By listening closely to the echoes of the past, we can understand that power has always known how to make itself heard, often in ways that we no longer consciously notice. Next time you walk into a modern courtroom, a grand government building, or even a CEO's office, pay attention to the sounds. The quiet hum of the air conditioning, the heavy sound-dampening carpets, the authoritative click of a door. You might just find that the ancient acoustic strategies of power are still with us today, whispering authority into our ears. For thousands of years, sound wasn't just background noise. It was an active ingredient in the art of medicine, a powerful tool for both the body and the soul. Today, we're stepping into the ancient infirmaries, the sacred healing temples, and the quiet spaces where sound itself was a prescription. This is the story of medicinal melodies, the forgotten soundscapes of healing and ancient medicine. Let's travel back in time, not to a noisy marketplace or a chaotic battlefield, but to a place of quiet reverence and hope, a Greek temple dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. Imagine the sun filtering through stone columns, casting long shadows on the floor. The air isn't silent. If you listen closely, you can hear the soft, rhythmic hum of a priest's incantation, a whispered prayer for a patient sleeping nearby, hoping for divine cure in their dreams. These weren't just words. They were vibrations, intended to create an atmosphere of peace and receptivity to healing. The ancient Greeks understood that the mind and body were deeply connected, and calming the spirit was the first step toward mending the flesh. The gentle, consistent murmur of prayers was a sonic blanket, wrapping the sick in a sense of security and divine care. It was a soundscape designed to lower anxiety, to instill faith, and to prepare the patient, body, and soul for recovery. This was the auditory heartbeat of the Asclepian, a place where hope was spoken into existence. Beyond the prayers, other subtle sounds filled these healing sanctuaries. Listen for the rustle of dried leaves as a healer sorts through a basket of medicinal herbs. Hear the gentle, rhythmic scrape and tap of a stone mortar and pestle, grinding ingredients into a fine powder for a poultice or a remedy. This wasn't the harsh clang of a modern pharmacy. It was a careful, deliberate process. Each sound was part of the ritual of preparation, a testament to the care being invested in the patient's well-being. Think of the soft sloshing of water being poured into a clay bowl, the whisper of linen bandages being unrolled, or the quiet, reassuring voice of the healer explaining the treatment. These weren't just functional noises. They were part of a holistic sensory experience. The patient didn't just receive a remedy. They witnessed its creation. The gentle sounds of preparation were a promise of relief, a signal that help was being crafted with expertise and compassion. In a world without sterile packaging and synthesized drugs, these sonic cues were powerful reassurances, integral to the placebo effect and the patient's own belief in their recovery. Of course, not all medical sounds were so gentle. Ancient medicine was often a hands-on, visceral practice. Imagine the tense silence in a room broken by the sharp, grating sound of a bone being set back into place. It's a jarring thought, but it was a sound of restoration, a necessary violence to initiate healing. Following that, you would hear the careful, methodical wrapping of bandages, the soft tearing of cloth, and the steady, calming voice of the practitioner, offering words of comfort and instruction. These sounds, while perhaps unpleasant, were signs of active, effective intervention. They represented a confrontation with injury, followed by the meticulous process of repair. For the patient and their family, these were the sounds of progress. The healer's calm demeanor, conveyed through the tone of their voice, would have been just as important as their physical skill. It could turn a moment of pain and fear into an experience of trust and resilience. This soundscape of acute care was a powerful drama of breakage and mending, a narrative of healing told through action and reassurance. But the use of sound in ancient healing went far beyond the practical and the incidental. In many cultures, sound was seen as a direct conduit to the spiritual world, a way to channel healing energy and drive out illness. Let's shift our focus to a shamanic ritual, perhaps in the vast plains of Siberia or the dense forests of the Amazon. Here the primary tool of the healer is the drum. The relentless, rhythmic beat is not just music, it's a vehicle. The shaman uses the pulsating sound to enter a trance state, to journey into the spirit world, to find the root cause of the patient's ailment. For those gathered, the drumming is hypnotic, a powerful unifying force that focuses the collective energy of the community on the act of healing. The beat might start slow, like a heartbeat, before building in intensity and complexity, creating a rich sonic tapestry that can feel both overwhelming and cleansing. The drum was the shaman's horse, their boat, their wings, carrying them to a place where the spiritual sickness could be confronted and healed. Alongside the drum, the human voice was perhaps the most versatile healing instrument. Chanting was a universal practice found in cultures from ancient Egypt to indigenous America. These were not just random songs. The chants often consisted of specific words, syllables, or tones believed to hold inherent power. Think of the deep, resonant chanting of Tibetan monks, where specific frequencies are produced to alter consciousness and promote a state of deep meditation and physical well-being. They believed that certain vibrations could resonate with the body's own energy centers, or chakras, helping to clear blockages and restore a natural, healthy flow. Similarly, in many traditions, an illness was seen as a spiritual imbalance, a disharmony. The chant, with its repetitive structure and specific tonal quality, was designed to retune the individual to bring their personal vibration back into alignment with the harmony of the cosmos. It was a form of spiritual recalibration, performed with the voice as the primary instrument. The instruments used for healing were as diverse as the cultures themselves. Beyond the drum, consider the soft, ethereal notes of a flute used in some Native American healing ceremonies to soothe the spirit and invite positive energies. Imagine the ringing of bells or the shaking of rattles, instruments used to purify a space, to ward off malevolent spirits thought to be causing the sickness, and to awaken the patient's own life force. Each instrument had a specific purpose, a specific voice in the orchestra of healing. The high-pitched chime of a bell could cut through spiritual stagnation, while the dry, rustling sound of a gourd rattle could represent the sound of rain, symbolizing cleansing and new life. These weren't just noisemakers. They were sophisticated tools in a complex system of spiritual medicine. The healer was a conductor, choosing the right sonic texture and rhythm to address the specific needs of the patient, composing a unique medicinal melody for each individual. These healing soundscapes were, above all, places of solace. In a world filled with uncertainty and hardship, the healing ritual provided a sanctuary of structured, meaningful sound. Whether it was the whispered prayer in a Greek temple, the grinding of herbs, or the powerful beat of a shaman's drum, these sounds aimed to do one thing: to soothe and restore. They replaced the chaotic noise of the outside world with a focused, intentional sonic environment. They acknowledged that illness was not just a physical problem, but an emotional and spiritual one as well. By engaging the sense of hearing, ancient healers sought to calm the anxious mind, to instill a sense of hope, and to actively involve the patient in their own recovery. The sounds were a message. You are not alone. You are being cared for. Harmony is being restored. This was the profound wisdom of our ancestors, a recognition that sometimes the most powerful medicine is not a pill, but a prayer, a chant, or a simple, reassuring tone. So the next time you find comfort in a piece of music or the sound of nature, remember this ancient tradition. You are tapping into a form of medicine as old as humanity itself. Our ancestors knew that the world was alive with vibration, and that by listening closely and creating intentional sound, we could align ourselves with the rhythms of health and life. The soundscapes of ancient medicine may have faded into history, but their echoes remain, reminding us that healing is a holistic art, one that engages all of our senses, especially our ability to listen. In this final chapter, we stand at the very edge of sound, peering into the profound silence that has always surrounded humanity's greatest mystery, death and the afterlife. This is the soundscape of the tomb, of burial, and of our eternal questions about what lies beyond. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine you are standing inside a newly sealed Egyptian pyramid. The heavy stone door has just scraped shut, its grinding echo the last sound from the world of the living. What replaces it? A quiet so deep, so complete, it feels like a physical presence. The air is still, thick with the scent of resins, oils, and antiquity. The only sound is the faint, almost imperceptible whisper of air currents, or perhaps the settling of dust on golden treasures. This isn't just an absence of noise. It's a carefully constructed silence, a sacred stillness designed to last for eternity. It's the sound of waiting, waiting for the soul's journey to begin, waiting for rebirth in the field of reeds. This engineered quiet was the final, most crucial element of the pharaonic burial, a sonic barrier between the chaos of life and the perfect order of the afterlife. The tomb was not just a house for the body, it was a vessel for silence itself. But before this eternal quiet, there was a crescendo of sound, the sound of grief. Let's travel to an ancient Greek funeral, prothesis asterisk, where the body is laid out in the home. The air is filled with the sounds of mourning. It's not a quiet, reserved sorrow. It is a powerful, cathartic, and very audible performance of grief. Hear the high-pitched, piercing wails of the women, a ritual lament known as the asterisk goes asterisk. It's a heart-wrenching chorus, a spontaneous outpouring of personal pain as they tear at their hair and beat their chests. Professional mourners might also be present, leading a more structured chant, the asterisk, THRENES asterisk. Their voices weave a tapestry of sorrow, recounting the deceased's virtues, their deeds, and the gaping void their absence leaves behind. This wasn't just noise. It was a necessary social and psychological process. The sounds of lamentation were a public declaration of loss, a way for the community to process its grief collectively, and a final vocal honor paid to the departed. It was a loud, passionate farewell, a sonic bridge that helped carry the living from shock to acceptance. Now, let's shift our focus to the creation of these final resting places. The sounds of tomb construction were a testament to power, belief, and immense effort. Picture the Giza Plateau thousands of years ago. The air hums with activity. You hear the rhythmic clinking of thousands of copper chisels against limestone and granite, a constant, percussive soundscape. Listen to the shouts of foremen, their voices carrying over the din, coordinating the immense workforce. Hear the deep, resonant groans of massive stone blocks being levered into place, the friction of wood against stone, and the straining of ropes. But even amidst this industrial-scale noise, there would have been a certain solemnity. This wasn't just construction. It was a sacred duty. The work was likely accompanied by the chants of priests, blessing the tools and the stones, their rhythmic voices adding a layer of spiritual purpose to the physical labor. The sound of building a tomb was the sound of defying mortality, of carving a permanent legacy into the very fabric of the earth, a symphony of human effort against the inevitable silence. Consider the quieter, more intimate moments of the burial itself. In a Roman catacomb, deep beneath the bustling city, a different soundscape emerges. A small group of early Christians gathers in the flickering torchlight. Their voices are hushed, not just out of reverence, but also out of a need for secrecy. You hear the soft murmur of prayers, a low, continuous hum of hope and faith. Listen to the gentle scrape of a trowel as it seals a burial niche, a **** with plaster. The sounds are small, deliberate, and personal. There's the quiet clink of a coin placed in the mortar or a small, carved symbol being pressed into the wet plaster of fish, an anchor, a silent message of faith for those who would see it later. This was a soundscape of community and shared belief in the face of persecution. The quietness was a shield, and the soft sounds of their rituals were whispers of defiance, a promise of resurrection spoken into the earth. Let's return to the tomb, long after the mourners have departed. Think of the incredible Etruscan necropolises, their cities of the dead, adorned with vibrant frescoes depicting banquets, music, and dancing. While the tombs themselves are silent, they are designed to evoke sound. The paintings on the walls are frozen music. You can almost hear the lilting notes of a double flute, the aulos ***, or the strumming of a lyre. You can almost hear the laughter and conversation of the feasting figures, forever celebrating in the afterlife. The silence of the tomb is punctuated by these imagined sounds, a visual echo of a life well lived. The Etruscans didn't fill their tombs with silence as an end in itself, but as a canvas onto which they painted the joyous sounds of an eternal party. The quiet of the grave wasn't an ending. It was the venue for a celebration that would never cease. The offerings placed within these tombs also carried their own sonic potential. In the tomb of Tutankhamun, alongside the golden shrines and chariots, were a pair of trumpets, one of silver and one of bronze. For over 3,000 years they sat in perfect silence. But they were not just objects. They were dormant sound instruments intended to be used by the king in the afterlife, perhaps to rally his spiritual armies or to announce his arrival to the gods. When they were finally played in 1939, their sound, a raw, brassy fanfare, was literally a blast from the past of voice that had been silent for millennia. The presence of these instruments and of sistrums, clappers, and other musical devices and tunes across the ancient world tells us that the afterlife was not expected to be silent. It was a place where the sounds of earthly life, especially music and ritual, were believed to continue. The objects were promises of future sound. Finally, let us contemplate the very nature of this ultimate silence. From the megalithic passage tombs of Newgrange in Ireland, aligned to capture the light of the winter solstice in a silent, golden beam, to the vast terracotta army of China's first emperor, standing in silent eternal vigil, the architecture of death is an architecture of quiet. This silence is the definitive boundary. It is the moment sound ceases to be a part of the human experience. It's the transition from the vibrant, noisy world of the living to the great unknown. But this silence is not empty. It is filled with meaning, with belief, with hope, and with fear. It speaks of a profound respect for the dead and a deep curiosity about what comes next. The quiet of the tomb is the final word in the story of an ancient life, but it is also the opening line of a story we are still trying to understand, the story of eternity. The sounds of death and burial are the sounds of this transition, the final, fading notes of a life lived before the grand, eternal silence begins. As our auditory journey through the ancient world draws to a close, we return to the present with a newfound, deeper appreciation for the unseen, or rather, the unheard dimensions of history. Think about it. When we imagine the past, we usually picture silent scenes like old photographs. We see the grandeur of the Colosseum, the serene pyramids, or the bustling Agora of Athens. But history wasn't silent. It was a symphony of sounds, a complex and vibrant soundscape that defined the lives of those who came before us. Let's travel back for a moment. Imagine standing in the heart of ancient Rome. What do you hear? Not silence, but the constant rumble of ironclad wheels on stone-paved streets, the clamor of merchants, hawking their wares in a dozen different languages, the distant rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer, and perhaps carried on the wind, the deafening roar of the crowd from the amphitheater. These weren't just background noise. They were the very pulse of the city, sounds that signaled opportunity, danger, community, and commerce. Every sound had a meaning. Now, let's shift our focus from the city to the sacred. Picture yourself within the stone circle of Stonehenge, or at a temple in ancient Egypt. Here the soundscape changes dramatically. The urban cacophony gives way to something more deliberate, more mystical. You might hear the low, resonant chant of priests, the rhythmic beat of drums intended to connect with the divine, or the hypnotic strumming of a lyre during a religious ceremony. In these sacred spaces, sound was a tool, a bridge between the mortal and the spiritual realms. It was used to create awe, to focus the mind, and to structure rituals that held entire societies together. These sounds weren't just heard. They were felt vibrating through the very stones and through the souls of the worshippers. Even in the quietest moments of daily life, sound played a crucial role. Consider the simple domestic setting of a Roman villa or a Greek home. You'd hear the gentle hum of a spinning wheel, the rhythmic grinding of grain into flour, the laughter of children playing in a courtyard, or the soft melody of a flute played to pass the evening. These are the sounds of life, of family, of work, and of peace. They tell a story of human experience that is both profoundly different from our own, yet comfortingly familiar. The gentle lapping of waves against a Phoenician trading ship, the rustle of papyrus scrolls being unrolled in the library of Alexandria, the roar of a lion in the bay arena, each sound was a thread in the rich tapestry of ancient existence. This brings us to the core of our exploration. These sounds, from the mighty roar of a lion to the gentle strum of a lyre, were absolutely integral to the human experience. They shaped daily routines, spiritual beliefs, and the very fabric of ancient societies. The town crier's bell dictated the flow of information, the war horn dictated the flow of battle, and the sound of a water clock dictated the flow of time itself. To ignore the soundscape of the past is to miss a fundamental layer of what it meant to be alive. It's like watching a movie with the sound turned off. You get the picture, but you miss the emotion, the tension, and the full story. So as we stand here, back in our modern, sound-filled world, we must acknowledge a poignant truth. We can never truly hear these ancient echoes again. Time has silenced them forever. The voices have faded, the instruments have crumbled, and the cities have fallen quiet. But that doesn't mean they are lost to us completely. Through the incredible work of archaeologists, historians, and acousticians, we can reconstruct and, most importantly, imagine these soundscapes. By studying ancient texts, examining surviving instruments, and analyzing the acoustics of ancient ruins, we can begin to piece together this lost auditory world. And in doing so, we gain a more profound, more visceral connection to our ancestors. We move beyond simply knowing facts and dates and begin to feel a part of their world. We can imagine the fear a soldier felt hearing the thunder of an approaching cavalry charge, the tranquility a philosopher felt listening to the trickle of a fountain in a garden, or the communal joy of a festival filled with music and laughter. These imagined sounds remind us that history isn't just about what we see in museums or read in books. It's about a full sensory experience. It's about what we can imagine hearing. The whispers of history are all around us, waiting to be listened to. Thank you so much for joining me on this immersive exploration into the sounds of the past. If you enjoyed this journey and want to hear more stories from history, please give this video a like, share it with fellow history enthusiasts, and be sure to subscribe for more deep dives. I'd love to know what you think, so let me know in the comments what other ancient mysteries you'd like us to explore together. Until next time, keep listening to the whispers of history.